Was there any one or two kind of people or resources that you leveraged during this time of recovery? Was there any kind of one individual that was like inspirational in that approach?
Yeah, there was a couple. There was my therapist, a guy by the name of Dr. Paul Hirsch, who had a really direct way about confronting issues. And then my sponsor or mentor in the 12-step program that I went through, here's a man who, was a little further down the road from me, who had dealt with his own kind of issues and had put some time between him and his last drink. And, that idea is that success leaves clues, right? Yeah. And we hear that a lot. And so, here I went from this kind of lower companions that were supporting my addiction, and whether it was doctors or guys I hung out with, to this new group of people who were focused on the life I wanted to have. And so when you put yourself around those people, there's real truth to show me your friends, I'll show you your future. There's real truth to, your vibe attracts your tribe. And there's real truth to when you surround yourself with the right people, you can change the direction of your life. And that's what I did, man.
Welcome to Limitless Minds, the podcast where curiosity meets greatness. Each week, co-host DJ Eitzen and Harry Wilson sit down with some of the most exceptional individuals across sports, business, and beyond. From world-class athletes and peak performance coaches to visionary CEOs, entrepreneurs, and influential authors, they dive deep into the stories and strategies that drive extraordinary success. If you're ready to discover what it takes to be truly limitless and push beyond your own limits, you're in the right place.
On this episode of Limitless Minds, we have Charlie Smith, a keynote speaker and a mental performance consultant with a mission to empower others to take control of their lives. After 30 years of success in commercial development, Charlie now helps organizations, teams, and individuals master the mental skills needed to achieve their goals. His signature platform, My Life, My Pen, inspires Fortune 300 companies, executives, athletes, and even Academy Award winners to intentionally author their own stories and perform at their highest levels. He's a Limitless Minds coach. He's Charlie Smith. Enjoy. All right. On today's episode, we have Charlie Smith. He is a Limitless Minds legend. He's a Limitless Minds coach. He's one of our favorite people, and it's always kind of quite sought after from the organizations that we work with, and anybody who runs into Charlie, feels better and is better after just a few minutes with him, let alone hours or days or amount of time like we've had the luxury of having. So we want to share him with our audience. Charlie, what's up, man? How are you?
I'm doing great, man. It's so amazing to be here with both of you this morning. I'm looking forward to this. Have been for a while.
Yeah, it's good, man.
Very cool.
Where are you at right now? Where are you located?
I am in Westlake Village, so just about an hour north of Los Angeles, hour south of Santa Barbara, kind of over the hills from Malibu. Not from here. Actually grew up on the East Coast. I'm a Maine boy, but we'll get into that.
Yeah, man. Well, I wish I was where you were. Golly.
Yeah, I'm jealous, man.
We were receiving here, but
he said Malibu, Santa Barbara. He's just throwing out just Manhattan Beach.
He's bragging is what he's doing.
Pacific Coast Highway, any place. It's warm.
Just giving you the coordinates.
I remember playing baseball in college and playing against Pepperdine out there, and like you get out there, and then you kind of realize that like, what am I doing living where I live right now? Like, why wouldn't anybody and everybody live out here? It's just unbelievable. So that's good, man. That's good. Well, listen, we're excited to dig into, really, two different parts of this conversation. Your story is one that is like, it has left a mark on me. I know it's left a mark on some people that have gotten a chance to hear it. Right. And, it's a story of resilience. It's a story of trauma and like, and adversity, and it goes all the way back, right? And so like we're really curious to learn about this because it feels like it kind of birthed. There was kind of this origin story between like this concept that you have called My Life, My Pen. This platform you have, My Life, My Pen. And so I'd love for you to let's jump right in and for you to take us back a little bit into those early days and share what it was like growing up in your household.
Yeah, man. Thank you for asking. I read, kind of the introduction, and it's always emotional. I did say I'm in Westlake, but I'm not from here. I actually grew up in a very small town in Scarborough, Maine, about an hour and a half north of Boston. My dad was a college professor at the University of Southern Maine. My mom was a first grade school teacher. And, to the outside world, you guys, my family looked like every middle-class family in Scarborough, Maine. In fact, in 1970, we were on the cover of Catholic Digest magazine as a model Catholic family. And, one of the things that has become apparent as I've opened up about my story is just, we just don't know what's going on in someone else's lives. We can all have this external appearance of what we want people to see. And that wasn't the reality of my young life. Yeah. I suffered my first closed fist punch and a bloody nose, at the age of 6 years old. And it wasn't from a tussle at school or a bully or some adolescent, wrestling match. It was at the hands of my dad, and that violence would continue and escalate for the next 13 years of my life. And I would grow up in an unsafe environment at the hands of the person who really was put on this earth by a Heavenly Father to protect me. And so you can imagine, we talk a little bit about self-image, what must be wrong with me if this is the way I'm being treated was a lot of what influenced me from a very young age.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, that's powerful, man. Take us back. You said that, that you were, hit by your father. Tell us about how that impacted you, how that affected you, how that, changed you as an adolescent, and what that means to you as an adult now.
Yeah, it's a great question, TJ. It shaped and formed a young mind, and I think at that age, there were three things that I learned. And one of them I just shared with you which was this idea that there must be something wrong with me, in order to have been treated that way. And, I grew up in an environment and in an era where parents were tough. I had a family friend of mine who was an Italian contractor, and their dad was tough, but he loved them, and he had unconditional love for them. And there's a difference between that and abuse. And so, for me, it shaped and molded me because I didn't feel worthy. I didn't feel like I fit in anywhere. And so I developed some coping skills at a very young age. One of them is I learned to lie, right? Not like, did you break that so you don't get in trouble, but like I learned to lie about who I was. Like I went to school, and if I wanted you guys to like me, I knew I needed to fit in and be like you. So I said I went on vacations I didn't go on. I said my dad took me to ball games we never went to. I had this desperate need to try to shape and mold my exterior to be who you wanted me to be. And so you wouldn't know who I really was. And the other unfortunate habit that I developed was I took my first drink at the age of 12 years old. And, when I took that first drink, it made the pain go away. Alcohol, you can count on to numb your mind and to numb your feelings. And so, I developed a pattern of dishonesty. I developed the pattern of changing the way I felt with external things like substances. And the other thing I learned was a good hard work ethic and an ability to put my mind into school and work. Those two things were acceptable to my dad to be out of the house. And as you could imagine, being out of my house was super important. So I got a paper route at 6 years old, 7 years old, 8 years old, riding my bike, snowy, cold, icy Maine winters. Not a great time to be on your bike or walking around with a backpack of newspapers, but I would do anything to be out of my house. And, I'm 58 years old, and I've never been unemployed. I've never been written up. I've never been fired, laid off from any job I had because of those patterns I developed at a young age. So those were kind of how it shaped and molded me.
Charlie, do you have siblings?
I do. I have two remaining siblings. My sister took her own life 6 years ago, but I have two younger brothers.
Yeah, yeah. And is your dad still alive?
He's not.
Okay. Yeah. What and are you close with your siblings that are still with us?
I'm closer with one of my brothers. When you grow up in a family like mine, there's a real need to survive, and so you kind of run, and so everyone's kind of protect yourself at any cost. And so I was a runner. I'm literally here in California doing these geographic, like if I could get somewhere else, that I could change who I was, and we could talk a little bit about how I did that. But yeah, I mean, I'm really close with my with one of my brothers and getting closer with one of my other brothers.
Yeah, that's good. Well, I think that many of us can empathize with portions of this experience, right? I mean, not everybody has the experience that you had, for sure. I know that I had some childhood trauma that I still carry with me. And what's interesting is like a lot of that trauma, I would tell stories, you know what I mean? To like, as a result of trying to fit in, you know what I mean? And like, but like not to stand out. I wasn't telling on the things that weren't true to like stand out. I was trying to fit in because I already felt like I stood out and it was uncomfortable. And it took me a while to get over that and kind of reconcile with that. over time. And I think that was really like a response to just like trauma and trying to kind of redirect it, you know?
Yeah.
So I know I can certainly empathize. I'm sure some listeners and audience members can too. I mean, it is a coping mechanism, and
no question. And Charlie, you know, you mentioned your siblings and your sister who passed. How many of your siblings then dealt with addiction, or if you don't mind sharing that?
Yeah, I mean, my sister, you know, took her own life, and I'd say a lot of that had to do with untreated addiction and just her own trauma that she went through. She lost a child, you know, and had all of the pain of growing up that she didn't deal with. And that's really my message is really for people to understand, and what I learned the hard way, which I don't want other people to have to learn, is what you don't deal with will deal with you. So the more you try to stuff and bury this pain, the more projected pain actually gets projected on other people. And so unprocessed pain becomes this kind of almost like a venom inside of me that I ended up pushing out on other people. And so it's really important that whatever it is, small, big, large, T, trauma, you know, or adversity in your life, that you find a healthy way to deal with it. Because, right, the difference is there was nothing wrong with me as a young kid. There was a lot wrong with my dad, but there was nothing wrong with me. And that's kind of, as we get into why I took the pen and why I believe taking the pen back and owning it is a very important thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Now you mentioned the addiction part and like being 12 years old. That's my daughter's 12, right?
Imagine, right?
Yeah. I mean, truly, right? Like imagine, I can't imagine, like, even if I try, right? And so you're 12. I don't know that, was this something you did on your own, or did you have peers around you that were feeding that first kind of leap into alcohol and I imagine maybe other things?
It was an innocent night at a buddy. Eric Knott's parents went away. We were at his house. You know, his older sister was watching us. She was gone, and there was vodka in the liquor cabinet. And so, you know, we said, hey, let's try this. And you know, Eric is a successful, you know, veteran, an airline pilot, and I became an alcoholic and an addict because alcohol affected me differently than it did him. Alcoholism and addiction isn't what you drink. It's not how much you drink. It's not when you drink, it's why you drink. And when you have this coping of this drink, this external thing is changing the way I feel about myself, and it's allowing me to not deal with the things that are happening, you crave more of it. As the trauma escalates, you look for more ways to escape. And that's where, you know, alcoholism and addiction can sneak in because it's a progressive disease. You know, I wasn't alcoholic and addicted at 12 years old, but I had found a solution to my thinking problem and my trauma problem that over the period of my life would continue to get worse, not better.
How like at that age, like, I mean, typically, you know, and because I have some friends that I grew up with that dabble back in that age range, and they would, you know, obviously they would hide this. They wouldn't, that, you know, nobody knew, if you will, except for like our friends, right? And it was like, and the reality is they were cool, right, because of it, and you know, like the perception, right? But they had access, right? But then they'd kind of try to assume that nobody knew, like, and they would do that for a while. And part of that trajectory was there was like a thrill in the fact that they were hiding it. You know what I mean? And did that resonate with you at that age, that like part of the thrill in itself was like this kind of rebellious nature towards it?
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up because, you know, there is a stark difference between adolescent experimentation with, you know, the kinds of things that you get away with, whether it's, you know, drinking alcohol, staying up past curfew, maybe going where you're not supposed to go and doing something you're not supposed to do. And the way that, you know, the best way I could describe it is the alcohol and addicted mind. It's an obsession of the mind. Like, I couldn't wait to do it again. I started thinking about it. I started obsessing on wanting to be able to escape again. And so it becomes this tie between, you know, how you see yourself and what you do. We talk about, you know, our identity being tied between those two things. And so it became an obsession of mine, and it became a way that anytime I was uncomfortable, I would seek it out and find that as a solution, have to hide it more. And the other thing that was different than my friends was they had the ability to stop. And I didn't. Once I started, I had little control over how much I took in. And more importantly, I had no control over what happened once I did start.
Mm-hmm. What did it go from like being fun, like that first time, to being a problem? Do you remember that moment in time?
Yeah, it's interesting, the trajectory of my life. So I believed when I was growing up, especially after the incident, 19 years old, when my dad leveled a 45 caliber pistol at my head and I left home at 19 years old, with nothing but student loans and credit card debt to make my way in this world. It was, one of the most horrific nights I could have experienced. And when I left, I had this idea that if I could leave Maine and I could achieve success, that I would prove, that what was happening to me didn't happen, that I could succeed. If I could leave and achieve, I'd succeed. That was kind of my trajectory. And so I leaned into that part of my life. I was still drinking, but my alcoholism and addiction hadn't caught up with me because I was putting my attention into avoidance by having material success. And so, I moved from Maine to Connecticut, from Connecticut to New York, from New York to California. And every time I would make those moves, I would recreate this new version of myself. I'd tell a new story. I mean, I literally stopped saying I was from Maine. I started telling people that I was from Connecticut. I'd become so obsessed with changing the narrative of what happened to me that those patterns, right? We do things in pattern because we get a payoff from them, good or bad. So all of those things, dishonesty, working hard, and drinking, all went with me to California. There's that old adage, wherever you go, there you are. Well, wherever I went, there I was. And that new version of me, was trying to find a home away from home. And so I would have all of those things, guys. I would become one of the most active retail developers in the state of California. I had an incredibly successful commercial real estate career until we're good until we're not, right? You could take Tiger Woods, who was good until he wasn't. Right. We can look at his trajectory from winning majors, and hiding and living in a double life, to showing up on the front page of the paper with a DUI and a 9-iron through his windshield. We're good until we're not. We get away with things until we can't, and that was the story of what happened to me, DJ. And so, I found myself at the age of 35 in full-blown alcoholism and addiction.
Yeah. So at 35, full-blown alcoholism and addiction. And then you talked about this like 30 plus year, commercial real estate career that you flourished, right? When did the career start? And like, what was the timeline of like your career? And tell us a little bit about that career and how it got off to such a, great start and was so successful.
Oh. Thoughts become things. I mean, I got a internship at a New York savings bank when I was in college. I'd take the train into New York City every week. They put me in every department within the bank. So I was in consumer lending. I was a teller one week, credit card services. And one week I ended up in commercial real estate. And I remember taking the train home as a, 18, 19-year-old kid from New York City. I'm from Maine. I'm on a train from New York City to Connecticut. And I remember thinking every building that I went by, somebody bought it, somebody built it, somebody financed it. And I was like, God, this is really intriguing to me. That internship I just done in commercial real estate, that's really appealing to me. That might be something that I want to do when I get out of school. And sure enough, 2 years later, I got a job as an analyst at a New York bank in their commercial real estate department, doing exactly what I had thought I wanted to do 2 years before. So, we teach thoughts become things. Well, I literally was an example of that. Wow. And so the bank I worked for got taken over by the federal government, and I was out in California working on a bunch of distressed real estate that the bank had foreclosed on. And I had a decision to make. Was I going to go open a restaurant, or was I going to try to figure out how this distressed real estate was an opportunity? So again, turning adversity into an advantage, I looked at this distressed real estate and said, I've learned these skills about how to run real estate. How can I turn that into an opportunity to help people add value and make money? And so, I went to work in 1995 for a couple of guys, and we started buying distressed real estate. And so I took those skills that I had developed, consciously competent, right, and learned how to apply them into an area where there was some dislocation. In 2004, I bought half that company. So I started as an asset manager, making $75,000 a year, and by 2004, I bought half the company.
Wow, that's incredible. That's really incredible. So when you're in your addiction and you're in the real estate business, Is it like, how does alcohol play into that? Is it when you have a win, you celebrate by drinking? Is it when you wake up, you have to get going by drinking? Like, tell us a little bit about like what that looks like.
Yeah, you won't hear me refer to functioning alcoholic. I was existing, right? And so I was using all of those skills. And there's some things that everybody needs to know about alcoholism and addiction. First of all, it's progressive. So over time, it gets worse, never better. It's chronic, which means it never goes away, and it's deadly. Over time, whether on the installment plan or otherwise, it's going to kill you if you continue with it. Whether it's from all of the things you read about these people that died with their loving family by their side, but they don't talk about the cirrhosis of the liver. They don't talk about the pancreatitis. They don't talk about, the things that were occurring as a result of drinking. We don't, and that's one of the things, and why I appreciate both of you so much, especially given the positions you each have in this world, being open to talking about it, because we suffer in silence because there's a stigma about alcoholism and addiction. I used to think an alcoholic was the brown trench coat, bum on the street, brown paper bag, no shoes, and talking to himself. And that wasn't me, so how could I be an alcoholic if I was, as you just pointed out, achieving these things? And that's because more than most alcoholics lead a double life, right? To the outside world, just like I learned growing up, I'd present this stage character I wanted you to believe, but I was going on business trips early. I was finding a way to mask my drinking and hide it. But everybody that knew me knew that I wasn't who they thought I should be, and that I was behaving in ways that weren't consistent with who I said. And so it's very progressive. And then we reach a point where we're going to either take that to the end or we're going to make a change. And so, we find a way, especially when you have a position of power, in a position of influence. There's a lot of people covering for me, right? Executive assistants cover for me. The people that work for me were covering for me because they wanted their jobs, and my business partners were covering for me and accepting things because I was performing. And so you kind of get a little bit of entitlement, a little bit of ego, and it didn't serve me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when you talk about serving, so like, I'm really curious about the healing, like in the, when recovery began, right? Like, what was the turning point for that recovery journey? And what was that first step on that, on that recovery and healing?
Yeah. So they say rock bottom is where you stop digging. And they say, for me, rock bottom is a great place to build an incredible foundation, right? To build the next structure on. Mm-hmm. And, using my real estate analogies, I'd been determined to be unsafe to enter at any cost, right? As they say in the real estate business, you get these red cards, where the inspectors say you can't go in here. That had become me. Yeah. What happened is my mom had a near fatal experience with my dad. She stayed in that relationship till she was 65. Mm-hmm. She's now one of the most outspoken advocates for domestic violence in the country. She was just voted Volunteer of the Year at 84 years old for her work on domestic violence. Wow. But she stayed till she was 65 years old, 43 years in that marriage. She had a near fatal experience with my dad, who pulled a gun on her and decided to leave. And where did she came? She came to California. And what happened was all of the lies I'd been telling, all of the things I didn't want my then wife to know, my kids to know, any of my friends to know, was sitting in my living room every night. And my drinking and, the truth of my life was now in my face every day. And so my drinking and drug use, I was very addicted to opiates as well. So I was doctor shopping, I was doing recreational drugs, I was buying street drugs. And that progression just escalated when my mom came out here to leave my dad. And I hit a point in 2008. It was February of 2008. I'd come back from a business trip. I'd missed my flight. I'd missed every important appointment I was supposed to keep. And my wife at that time and my two kids who I was supposed to meet, they left me. Mm-hmm. And I was sitting there alone in a therapist's office who I've been lying to for about 6 months. And he basically said, "It's over." And I said, "What's over?" He said, "Charlie, it's all over. You're going to have to get honest." And guys, I never heard a scarier thing in my life. I mean, the amount of dishonesty and the amount of wreckage that I'd caused was monumental, and there seemed no way out of it. And this is, I think, something that everybody needs to understand. Solution's not complete resolution of an issue. It's any improvement from where you are. And so I made a decision at that point that I wasn't going to let this history define me. And that's why we talk about Trevor Moawad, and we talk about these books behind me and some of these foundational teachings of getting to neutral and mental performance. Because I found recovery for my drug and alcohol problem. I went to my first 12-step meeting on February 15th of 2008. And I didn't solve all these problems. I didn't solve my marriage problem, my relationship with my kids, all the lies. But I did one thing to make that situation better. And on that basis, you can start to build a new house on that foundation, right? So we have these big monumental goals, whether they're health goals, financial goals, or dealing with addiction. And we don't have to solve the problem in one fell swoop, but can you do one thing to make that situation better? I went to that 12-step meeting, surrounded myself with a bunch of people that had experience with dealing with substance abuse, dealing with trauma, built a team around me, and then I got to work.
Yeah, that's amazing, man. But let me ask you this one question before we go and shut down, because we want to go into part 2 where we're going to talk a little bit about, this more of this kind of recovery and mission moving forward. But before we do, was there any one or two kind of people or resources that you leveraged during this time of recovery? Was there any kind of one individual that was like inspirational in that approach?
Yeah, there was a couple. There was my therapist, a guy by the name of Dr. Paul Hirsch, who had a really direct way about confronting issues. And then my sponsor or mentor in the 12-step program that I went through, here's a man who, was a little further down the road from me, who had dealt with his own kind of issues and had put some time between him and his last drink. And, that idea is that success leaves clues, right? Yeah. And we hear that a lot. And so, here I went from this kind of lower companions that were supporting my addiction, and whether it was doctors or guys I hung out with, to this new group of people who were focused on the life I wanted to have. And so when you put yourself around those people, there's real truth to show me your friends, I'll show you your future. There's real truth to, your vibe attracts your tribe. And there's real truth to when you surround yourself with the right people, you can change the direction of your life. And that's what I did, man, in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Well, there's more of us to talk about on part 2. We got a chance to really, talk about Charlie's story, and it's a powerful one. It's one that some that might be listening may share in some way, shape, or form, whether it was them, whether they're, family member of somebody who's been an addict and has gone through recovery. But either way, it's a story of resilience, right? And it's a long story of resilience, and one that you're still writing the chapter on, really, Charlie, right? And I think that is, we respect that tremendously. And I think as we can carry on the conversation in part 2, we want to talk a little bit about, that word self-image, right? And of course, as a position next to resilience, but also how you turned this kind of pain and this adversity story into purpose. And then also, I'm really curious to talk about Trevor Moab and your relationship with Trev, and kind of like how he impacted you. And because you mentioned a few of the kind of the tenets of what we work on as an organization together: neutral thinking, success leaving clues, pressures of privilege, etc. And so, eager to jump into that. We'll see you guys on part 2. And remember, not to be sick, to get better.